I have never been so wrong about a ship in my entire life. I am very salty about this. You can tell, but in the past few videos I have been struggling to find the best place in my new apartment to film a video. I finally settled on this white brick wall, which is not different from my old videos where I sat in front of a white wall, but this time we have brick, so there's texture to it. This is only because this spot has the best natural light that I've figured out so far. However, it is close to the entrance of my apartment, so you're gonna hear the lovely ambiance of New York throughout this video. I hope you enjoy. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in the month of September. This month I read 2 audiobooks and 3 physical books, all of which I have bought. I know, this is so surprising because I never buy books. I bought these 3 and I read them this month. I'm trying to be more liberal with buying books now because I figured out I can deduct the books and then I can just do giveaways for these books, so it's like a win-win for everyone. Unfortunately, I won't be doing giveaways for these specific books because I have some friends who wanted them. Don't worry, because your sugar mama on BookTube already has you covered, because I am giving away brand new 7 hardcover books. This is going to be a mega giveaway for one lucky subscriber because this video is sponsored by Book of the Month. Book of the Month is a super, oh my god, I can barely hold this all. Book of the Month is a super popular and fast-growing online service for readers. Their mission is to promote new and emerging authors and help readers discover books that they love. Every month they curate hundreds of books and curate the best 5 new books for you to check out. It is totally risk-free. You can skip any month, anytime without being charged. The books that I have for this month include The Ex-Hex, a quirky, steamy rom-com about a witch who curses her ex-boyfriend. Disaster obviously ensues and they end up having to work together to save their town. Lincoln Highway, a historical fiction novel that's set in the 1950s about an 18-year-old ex-convict who decides to start his life anew and head on a road trip with 2 friends and his brother to New York City. Harlem Shuffle, a literary novel that also takes place in New York City. This is a heist story that takes place in the 1960s and it covers a family saga and it has amazing commentary about race. Everything We Didn't Say, which is a thriller novel about a woman who returns to her hometown to repair her relationship with her teenage daughter and solve an infamous murder where her brother became the prime suspect. The Perishing, a speculative early release fiction that takes place in 1930s LA about a pioneering black journalist. This is my personal choice of the month because I dug into a little bit more of the synopsis and apparently she woke up having no memories of where she came from. As she gets older, she starts to suspect that she's actually immortal. But those are not just the 5 books because they also have add-ons which include Apples Never Fall, a thriller novel that shows 4 children whose mom gets murdered. 2 of them think their dad did it and the other 2 think he's innocent. And Book of Magic, which is a fantasy novel. This is the conclusion of the Practical Magic series and it has such a beautiful cover. Giveaway details will be in my description, but if you want these books guaranteed, you can sign up for your first box using my code READWithCindy for $9.99. The first book that I read this month was actually a previous Book of the Month choice, and that is Home Before Dark. This is a thriller novel about a young woman who has daddy issues. When she was a little kid, her parents moved her into this house that turned out to be haunted. It was so horrifying that they ended up having to move out, and her father wrote a best-selling memoir detailing all the spooky shit that happened and even goes into detail about what she was like as a kid and how she was saying like, oh my god, there's like this creepy, scary man that keeps popping up in my bedroom and I don't know what it is, and she keeps on crying like every dumb little kid does in a horror story. That memoir ended up blowing up so much that it pretty much follows her wherever she goes now. So even as an adult, people recognize her by name and they realize, oh my god, like she's that whiny little kid that was in the memoir about the scary house. She hates it so much because she doesn't believe that her dad was writing the truth. She believes that her dad was just making shit up so that they could get money. She doesn't even remember any of the things that happened in the book. So she's like, my dad is full of bullshit. The book starts off with her father dying, which means that she inherits the house. So she returns to the place to renovate it and put it up for sale because her job today happens to be a restorer of old homes. Because Riley Sager is nothing but subtle. Obviously, a woman who gets haunted by a house as a child will become a restorer of houses in her present day because you have no other personality other than that. Her whole shtick is like, I don't want this to define me, and yet she revolves her entire job around this. Okay. She moves into the house temporarily to prep it up for sale, but her homecoming isn't that great because a lot of the locals in the town that she's in are kind of pissed off that her dad's book made their town pretty shitty by name. A lot of creepy shit happens to her while she's inside the house too. It even starts to parallel what was described in the book. The chapters alternate between what the dad wrote in the book, so you actually get to read it for yourself from his perspective, and in present day where she is trying to figure out what's going on in the house. Every time you switch back and forth between the two, you get to see the parallels and the similarities between the two timelines. This is when she starts to suspect that maybe what her dad wrote actually has some truth to it. But is it true or not? You'll have to read to find out, because I'm not interested in spoiling, and also I forgot most of what happened already. There are two reasons why I've forgotten most of it. One, I have a very shitty memory, and two, I feel like this was a pretty standard thriller. I rated this 3 stars. I started having like a reading slump in the beginning of the month. I wanted like an easy palate cleanser in between dense books. Like when you want a quick thriller fix and you don't want to think too hard about anything, his books are pretty much standard for that. But is it amazing and does it blow your mind? Not really. I was talking about him with a friend last night because she has refused to read any of his books after reading Final Girls because she hated the way that he depicted women. I've read 3 books by him so far. This is my most recent one from him, and I definitely noticed that trend where he does not write women that well. What I found out from my friend is apparently he writes under a pen name and deliberately writes with an androgynous name so that it can seem like he's a woman. And when he first started off in his career, he didn't reveal to the public that he was actually a man. So that kind of makes me side-eye him a little bit, especially because my friend was explaining that the thriller genre was dominated by women, and now with men coming into the thriller genre, a lot of best-selling authors now are by men. She was really bitter about it because she was like, do we not get anything to ourselves? Personally, I think it's fine if a man wants to write a thriller genre. Genres aren't exclusive to any gender. However, if you're gonna write women in every book and you're gonna kind of try to catfish as a woman, at least do it well. That's all I'm really asking from you. Anyway, we all know that I'm overly picky when it comes to books, so if you just like thriller books in general and you want like a palate cleanser and a simple book, this could be the book for you. I'm just being a bitch. But you're on my channel, so you know what you're in here for. Speaking of being a bitch, the next book that I read is The Hawthorne Legacy, which I'm actually gonna save for the end of this video. I rated this 2 stars. I am so salty about this book and I want to rant about it, but my rant will include spoilers. So we're gonna move on to Never Say You Can't Survive. This is a book that is a combination of a few things. Part of it is kind of like a self-help book for writers. It is framed within the universal knowledge that life gets pretty shitty. The world is very scary. One way to escape from it is through the craft of writing. Especially when you feel helpless about what's going on in the world, writing can be a way to have some control over a fictional world or a fictional set of characters and craft a story for a world that you want to see, or maybe just focus on different kinds of problems that aren't yours. Or in my case, project your problems in a fictional universe and try to work it out through there instead of going to therapy. But for the author, she argues that writing can be a form of resistance because it reminds you that other ways of living and other futures are possible. She combines a lot of her writing tips with her own personal stories and anecdotes from her experience as a writer. She's really been through a lot, especially in 2020, which was a shitty year for everyone. That year was difficult for her because she was going through so much anxiety and emotional struggles with Trump being president and her being worried about what that meant for laws for trans people. She also dealt with her father passing away due to COVID, so it was a lot of struggling for her. She wrote this book kind of as a pep talk for anyone else who is also dealing with a lot of shit. I like Charlie Jane Anders because even though some of her stories don't exactly mesh well with me, I can tell she truly loves writing as a craft. She's not an author who is just pumping out books for the sake of making easy sales or trying to get notoriety or anything like that. She is someone who is just so passionate about the craft and about the imagination of stories, and she really emphasizes the community of writers as well, which is refreshing to see when you witness a lot of author drama in the other corners of the internet. It's nice to see genuine authors who just want to write and aren't concerned about ego or anything like that. So I really like her as a person. I would rate this book 3.5 stars because even though I did like like the pep talk for it. I don't think any part of the book really altered the way that I would write. It was more just of like a pick-me-up for me as like a writer, because sometimes I would read it and I'd be like, yeah, I agree with you, Charlie Jane Anders. I also love to focus on relationships in a book. That would help me get in like the mindset of wanting to engage back into my book again. But in terms of technical advice or the craft or anything like that, I don't think this is the kind of book for it. A lot of their writing advice is kind of like a general overview for how to write better without getting into much of the specifics. Even when she does bring up some interesting topics, for example, using anger as a way to write other emotions, she doesn't go as in-depth with it as I would like. She isn't as prescriptive of the advice, which I would prefer. So it's really more just ideologies that I think could encourage you to get into the mood of writing, but not something that would be like, oh my god, life-changing. I'm gonna remember this advice for the rest of my life. After that, I read The Final Girl Support Group. This is a thriller novel that focuses on the final girls that make it out alive at the end of every horror movie that was popular in the 80s. And another thing I found out is pretty common in horror movies is that they tend to make sequels and expand the franchise where she is once again haunted by the same killer and she has to do this shit all over again. I'm not someone who's into horror movies and I don't really watch any movies from the 80s, but Ellis made me watch Fear Street and he talked to me a lot more about like the tropes that are very common in horror movies. I felt like I was more prepared to engage in this book because it raises an interesting question where we often see these girls surviving and then the sirens come in, the credits roll, and then the audience moves on, but we don't really think about what happens to these girls after the movie ends. These movies tend to be very campy and gory, where it's just a bunch of people getting killed in gruesome ways. It's a lot of bloody fun, but when you think about it, these girls are gonna have PTSD for the rest of their lives, and that's why they now have a support group featured in this book. What I appreciate about the author that I noticed from his other book that I read is that he tends to focus on older women in their 40s or 50s, and I think that's nice because I want more older women in stories, because you know they've been through shit, especially these fucking women right here. So the main character is a real life final girl. She survived a massacre 22 years ago. For more than a decade, she has been meeting with 5 other final girls and their therapists in a support group where they talk about what they've been feeling, how have they been putting their lives back together. The plot begins when one of the women in their group is missing. There's a killer out there who knows about this group, and that person is determined to kill all of them one by one. It's like a bad reboot that nobody asked for. There are a few things I appreciated about this concept. One of them is that it talks a lot about how their tragedies have turned into movie deals, along with countless of sequels, and it's taking their trauma and turning it into entertainment. I feel like it parallels a lot to true crime and how people often view true crime stories as like a spectacle when it's actual lives that have been traumatized from this. So it's cool to see the book get meta about it, where the characters are talking about what it's like to have their lives on screen and just be viewed as entertainment. Another thing that I appreciated is the main character's depiction of OCD and just her general reactions to the world around her. When you see the way that she observes the world, there's so much attention to detail in the way that she feels like she has to protect herself. For example, when she sits anywhere in a room, she has to make sure to sit where a wall is behind her and keep her eye on the door at all times in case a person just comes in and tries to shoot everybody or kill them. When she is on the train or in public, she pays attention to the shoes that other people are wearing and what clothing they're wearing and specific details, because if they end up attacking her, she'll know specific details to tell to the police later on. All of these things I believe are very relevant to people who have experienced trauma. Even women in general who might not have had experienced it yet but are very wary of the high possibility that they could get hurt. You see how it has truly impacted her in her day-to-day life and how she has so much paranoia for that. That being said, I do have mixed feelings about this book. I do enjoy the writing style. I think it's a lot more fun compared to other thriller books I've read because the author does have a strong grasp when it comes to just writing in a fun and engaging way. I think he does take nods to several 80s films that were popular back in the day, but I couldn't tell you the details of it because again, I'm not someone who's super into that, so maybe if you're a fan of those 80s horror movies, you would have more fun with it, but because I wasn't, I focused more on the story as a standalone piece. The author was definitely trying to shed light on all of the women who become victims to this and are dehumanized by this and are then sensationalized without the public actually caring about what happens to them afterward. It's such an interesting topic to explore, but I'm not sure if it was actually explored. What solidified this for me was reading the last few lines of the book. And I'm not gonna spoil what happens, I'm just gonna share like the general sentiment. As the author is wrapping up the story, the way that the narrative is then framed is talking about how these women have been through so much and then they have to look out for each other, and that there's so much more than just their stories. These girls that make it out to the end, they grow up, they turn to women, they look out for each other, they're a sisterhood, they pick up the pieces and they must move on to be stronger. I'm reading this and I'm like, okay, I understand what you're trying to do, but you didn't actually do that. It was very much like a Riley Sager moment where he just randomly tries to make it all feminist and you're like, but where though? The final girls in this book were not looking out for each other. They hated each other most of the time. They were constantly annoyed by one another. They ditched the other several times. So I'm not seeing this sisterhood that was claimed to be here. We didn't really get to know these women as people beyond the horrible things that happened to them. So if you're saying that these women are more than their stories, I expect to see a lot more than just, oh, look at all these horrible things that are happening to them. So I think in terms of like nodding along to the 80s horror films that this is based on, it probably does a good job of that, but in terms of trying to tie a message to this or trying to be different from it, I don't think it succeeded in that aspect. So because I saw the author's intentions and I don't think he did well with those intentions, I ended up rating it 3 stars. The next book that I read is Chinatown Pretty. I'm actually cheating on this a little bit. This would be a book that would technically go in next month's wrap up, but I wanted to include it for this video because this is the only book that I have truly liked recently. So I wanted to feature this so that I don't look like a total bitch in this video. This is a photography book that is kind of like Humans of New York, where the photographer slash author has stopped people on the street to ask them about their stories and take a photograph of them, but instead of a random person that you see in New York, this is more focused on the elderly that you see around Chinatown. Specifically, it is focused on the fashion that they wear. So it's also kind of a lookbook as well. What's interesting about observing the fashion for these seniors is that it can often allude to their life philosophy or the way that they are so resourceful and creative. Because the thing about elderly Asians is that they know how to repurpose and reuse a lot of things. A lot of times the stuff that they wear could be fabric that they just happen to have on hand and they made themselves. Sometimes street fashion is just a weird combination of things. It's so interesting to see a lot of the stuff that these seniors are wearing because I can totally see it on like a street fashion magazine if it were worn by a younger person. Except these people are the OGs who know how to put together these looks and they might not even be doing it on purpose, and I just love that. These photos cover Chinatowns around San Francisco, Oakland, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York City, and Vancouver. There's also like a blurb in the beginning of each city that talks more about the culture of the different Chinatowns because some of the different regions can influence what these seniors choose to wear. So for example, San Francisco tends to get really windy, so a lot of the seniors will wear vests or like 7 layers, which means tons of different patterns that they're just throwing together in order to stay warm. I'm only halfway through this book right now and I absolutely love it. I have such a soft spot for elderly Asians. They are just so freaking cute. I'm gonna go ahead and cut to some of my favorite pages so that you can see. I really love this purple jacket that this woman is wearing. This jacket looks like it would be in a vintage store that gets gentrified and then you see all of these rich influencers wear it instead. This guy looks so badass right here. He has decorated his cap with a bunch of enamel pins and he looks so freaking cool. This man has a collection of 40 ties. In this photo, he's wearing a butterfly tie, but it was also mentioned that he has the separate tie that has parrots. What I find so charming is that a lot of times these seniors say that they just throw on whatever. These clothes will just be hand-me-downs or gifts or just random cheap stuff that they found, but then they throw it together and it actually looks really cool. There are a few examples of seniors who are a bit more purposeful with the clothes that they wear, like they go out of their way to have fun with it. In the example of this woman here, she is so adorable. I love her denim vest and her colorful patterns. Since I'm only halfway through, I don't have my final rating, but I'm debating between 4 and 5 stars. Personally, I want a lot more from the writing. Most of these pages just give a very short blurb on what the seniors are wearing, but I want more of a story. I don't want to just look at the photos, I want to read more about them too. We do get to see longer stories of some of the seniors. I assume they probably got to sit down and have a really long conversation and interview with them. Most of the time, it wasn't the case, and it just describes what the seniors are wearing, and I just want more. But I still really enjoyed it. This has definitely been the highlight for me this month. All right, enough positivity. It is now time to rant about the Hawthorne Legacy. I'm gonna go ahead and just give a brief overview of the synopsis before I dive into spoilers, and I'll let you know ahead of time. This is a sequel to The Inheritance Games, which is a book that I read earlier this year, and I loved it. I rated it 5 stars. I had so much fun. I probably only rated 5 stars because I buddy read it with my friend, and we just had such a good time. So I wanted to continue buddy reading with her for this sequel. It's basically like Cinderella meets Knives Out. It follows an ordinary poor girl who finds out that she has earned an inheritance from a billionaire who she has never met before. But in order to receive her inheritance, she has to move into his estate, which also comes with his 4 grandsons. The thing about this mysterious billionaire, though, is that he's a guy who has always loved riddles and playing games. So even this mansion that she moves into has all of these secret passageways. The grandsons that she meets, they have grown up being used to having to solve their grandfather's riddles. With her arrival there, they strongly suspect that she's a part of this game that the billionaire is trying to give to them. Obviously, from the synopsis, it sounds just like a reverse harem anime or some Asian drama. That's why my friend and I loved it, because we're just here to have a good time, because this is just fun escapism for you. I would totally love to inherit billions of dollars. Yeah, her life is now in danger because she doesn't know if she should trust the grandsons, and she has various people trying to kill her, but I would totally take that anyway. I would not even bother to solve the mysteries because the main character is supposed to be like this really smart girl who knows how to play chess and solve all these riddles and is very precocious for her own age. I would not be that kind of girl at all. I would be the dumb bitch that would just be chilling in my mansion. I would just be living my best life, and if I get killed, so be it. I would just spend money every day until I get assassinated. Live fast and die young. That's the dream for me. The sequel was recently released, and it aims to answer some of the questions that were brought up in the first book. I didn't have high hopes for this because I know that the sequel is usually not as good as the first book, but man, I did not expect to be so bamboozled. I have never been so wrong about a ship in my entire life. I am very salty about this. Apparently, there will be a 3rd book coming out, and my theory is that this author had not planned for it to be 3 books, and so the sequel suffered from 2nd book syndrome. Okay, my camera ran out of battery, so excuse the change in lighting, but this is like a good cutoff point before I rant about the spoilers. The mystery becomes so convoluted. It felt like the author's only solution to make the story longer or to provide answers for all of the questions from the first book was to just add a family member to the already complicated family tree, to the point where there became way too many family members to even keep track of. In the middle of the book, the main character finds these photos that have these guys where their names are included, and she realizes that all of their last names coincide with the same first names of the grandsons that she's living with, because apparently the mom, who had slept with all these different men, decided to name her kids after their same last names. How convenient that she just decided to make it super easy for us to tell whose dad belongs to who. The laziness reminds me of when I used to play The Sims, and I would make this biggest slut character ever with massive titties and like a sexy red dress and everything. I made her sleep with every guy in the neighborhood. Then I made her get pregnant with every guy. Then after the baby was born, I would kill all the fathers, but I would name the babies a very similar name to their respective fathers so that it would be easier to keep track of them. For example, if I made her sleep with a guy named Leon, I would name the baby Leo. Literally the same exact concept. And I realize now, my Sims experience could basically be a horror novel. The worst part about this book was the romance. I actually find love triangles to be quite juicy if it's done right. It was juicy in the first book, it just became annoying in the second book, mainly because the main character was so wishy-washy. She keeps on going back and forth between whether she likes likes this guy or this other guy. More specifically, she was getting so hung up over this guy called Jameson. Jameson was my favorite character in the first book. He was so fucking annoying in this second book. The love triangle worked because it was clear that Jameson was not interested in the main girl. He only saw her as a riddle, and you could tell that he was full of shit. He was just saying all these romantic lines to just be out of pocket and be a shit stirrer. And the main girl was very wary of all of that. She had more walls up between her and the other brothers, and she didn't trust them. So she didn't get caught up in this whole love triangle bullshit. In the second book, the whole time she's like, oh my god, maybe Jameson does like me, I don't know. What happened to the smart girl from the first book that just had a good head on her shoulders? I don't know where she went. For the longest time, I was so in denial about whether they would end up together. I was like, there's no way that she's gonna be with Jameson. But throughout the entire book, Jameson is the only brother who gets any kind of screen time. Grayson basically gets reduced to a background character. The two other brothers are also barely there too. A lot of the characters that you find so endearing from the first book just fade away to the background, and all of a sudden it becomes the Jameson show. Every time he showed up, he was so annoying because the author was trying to make it seem like he was developing genuine feelings for the main character, and I didn't buy that shit at all. Towards the end of the book, when they finally like confess their feelings and get together, he tells her that he doesn't see her as a riddle anymore, because that was like the whole conflict in the first book, that it was clear he was just using her and not seeing her as an actual person. How is it that at the end of this book, all of a sudden he's like, I don't see you as a riddle to solve anymore, when throughout the entire time in the book, they only talk to each other in riddles. He would literally just walk into the same room as her and he would tell her some kind of riddle and say some weird vague shit. He would come in the room and discuss a new mystery that they were solving together. So how are you trying to convince me that you don't see her as a riddle when you literally only talked about in riddles? You talked to her like you were a fucking fortune cookie the entire book. It made so much more sense for her to be with Grayson, because in the first book, it was clearly building up to that, where the main character was tempted by Jameson because he was so charismatic and charming, but it was clear that he didn't see her as a person, and Grayson was the brother who actually saw her as a person. Because in the climax of the first book, aka a very important scene, they had to guess each other's numbers, and they were able to do that because it represented how Grayson truly knew her as a person. Now all of a sudden, he just fucking fades away like a ghost. And in the climax of this book, she almost gets killed. Instead of him doing anything, Grayson literally just stands there like the fucking standing emoji. Jameson swoops in and he's like, oh my god, Grayson, why didn't you do anything? And then Grayson just says nothing. Huh? Why would he do that? Why would he just stand there? That literally makes no sense when you compare his character in the first book, and throughout the series he says that he's protective over the main character and all of his actions are basically to protect her. So this shit makes no sense. I have two theories about why we just flip-flopped in this romance. The first theory is that the author, I guess, changed her mind after writing the first book and just changed up the ship. Maybe Jameson was the more popular character, because there's no way that she had plans for Jameson to be endgame. With the way that she set everything up in the first book, it was very clear that Grayson was the most ideal option for the main character, and Jameson, like, he was a fun side character, but that's how he should be, just a fun side character. He's just someone who says out-of-pocket shit to stir the pot. That's why I liked him. He's not suitable for a love interest. He never treated the main character like a person or treated her that well. He was just charismatic. That's it. She must have changed her mind, flip-flopped for this book. My second theory is that because now this is a series with 3 books, maybe she's trying to do some kind of long con where she is using Jameson as like a diversion, but the main character will actually end up with Grayson in the end. Either way, I'm gonna be dissatisfied. Even if she ends up with Grayson in the end and there's some kind of reason why he just stood there, I don't care, because they acted so fucking stupid in this book. If Jameson was supposed to be endgame, the author did not develop their relationship well at all. Even if he's just supposed to be a diversion and maybe it doesn't work out for these two, it still doesn't make sense why all of a sudden he's into the main girl now. I don't think I'm gonna read the 3rd book because I just feel so sour about this entire thing. I might only read it if the 3rd book comes out and my friend and I are gonna dig through the spoilers to find out who she ends up with, and if it's gonna be Grayson, maybe we'll give the book a chance, but we will still hold grudges. If she actually is gonna be with Jameson, fuck this shit. This is the true riddle here, because this shit doesn't make sense. I can deal with the plot being weak in this book. I can deal deal with the writing being rushed and sloppy, but I cannot deal with a shitty love triangle with a wishy-washy main character and a romance that does not make sense. That is where I draw the line. As you can see, I started off this month very salty, but fortunately, Chinatown Pretty was here to save the day. I'm gonna sign off now, so go ahead and unsubscribe from my channel, and goodbye.
But you'll see me, yeah, I bet you'll see me on the bill.